Chapter 11. Kaitlyn settled into position, breathing in and out deeply several times before gripping his fingers tightly and beginning. Almost immediately, her hands closed even tighter around his in an involuntary spasm as his power coursed through and filled her. Without delay, she began circulating the power through her well and back into him. Jack remained still as he felt her exercise control and recognized the subtle movements in his body from the day before. Settling in for the time being, he tried to relax and follow what was happening as she focused on his training. The light outside dimmed as the sun fell below the horizon. It was only when the alarm they had set on their phones went off that they separated. Kaitlyn handled the pressure that his power created within her better than the day before. That said, when they separated, she was still covered in a fine sheen of sweat and panting. Her eyes were glowing brightly as she shuffled back away from Jack and flexed her hands as blue arcs of electricity began to flow from one finger to the next. Jack didn't dare to move as the arcs moved faster and faster until they created a ring around her palms that slowly grew in size. He watched as Kaitlyn's brow furrowed in concentration and the ring began to change shape. With a grunt of exertion, she forced the change until the glowing bolts collapsed into a ball that floated above her hand. He could hear the sharp crackle and pop of air igniting, along with the smell of burnt ozone. The hairs on their heads sprang to attention as static electricity filled the air around them. Jack felt unable to move as he watched her exercise her power for the first time. With every second that she held the blue ball of compressed energy in her hand, the glow in her eyes faded a little more until the glow had disappeared completely. Finally, she closed her eyes and cut the connection to the well of energy inside her. With a loud pop, the ball of lightning ceased to exist, and the room was plunged into darkness. She cursed as he heard her climb to her feet. "We stayed out too late. We need to hurry." The panic in her voice was enough to remind Jack of the monsters that had chased him the night he met her. Fumbling with his pocket for a second, he withdrew his phone and turned on the screen, illuminating the darkened classroom. Their shadows elongated and twisted in the dim light, setting their nerves on edge as they scrambled to collect their belongings. A distant howl filled the air and made them pause with wide, terror-filled eyes, both filled with the fear of knowing that monsters lived in the darkness. "We need to hurry," Kaitlyn said as she pushed him from the room. "If we can make it to the car, then we'll be fine," she informed him, even though both knew they would be out in the open for several minutes. She never parked the car near the abandoned building, opting to have them walk a few minutes each day for secrecy purposes. She didn't want a cop stopping to check on the building because they had gotten reports that a vehicle was parked near it. Jack's hand was warm as he firmly and unthinkingly took hold of hers and pulled her along at a faster pace. With every step they took and every second they remained touching, the glow in her eyes grew stronger and brighter. Another howl came, this time from multiple directions as they stepped from the building and into the open air. The sound of gravel being crushed drifted across the open space, reaching their ears as they stilled in fright. A harsh laugh that sounded off echoed in the suddenly frozen air, the breeze itself stilling at the sound. Kaitlyn buried her head into Jack's back as she whispered to him, "No matter what happens, do not let go of my hand, and do not let them see my eyes." She shivered in fear and pulled him back a step, so she was once more hidden inside the building. Jack could feel electricity fill the air around them, making his clothes cling to him uncomfortably as she began to prepare for their visitors. The furred face and elongated muzzle of a monster stepped into view. One of its eyes was red, while the other was completely black. With every step it took, saliva that hissed like acid bubbled from its misshapen maw and fell onto the pavement, each splash leaving small smoking craters in its wake. "You smell delicious," it growled at them, its scarred tongue making the words almost impossible to decipher. "We've been waiting for you to come out to play again. We didn't get to taste you last time." A hard growling voice came from the side as another monster stepped into view. Jack somehow knew it was one of the two from last time, but he found himself unable to deal with the shock that these monsters could talk. He found it hard to believe that a living, breathing being that could think and speak wanted to eat a human. Behind him, Kaitlyn could feel him stiffen in shock as they spoke and guessed what he was thinking. "To them, we are nothing more than cows and pigs. They aren't human even if they can speak right now, and regardless of how they look during the day. Our energy helps to extend their lives and make them stronger. Something about the way our power works makes us taste different from regular humans. Apparently, they can't stand the taste of non-magical people. She told him as she remained hidden, waiting for the right time. You should listen to her. A third voice spoke up as it also stepped into view, letting them know that all three directions in front of them were now blocked. To us, you are nothing more than the most delicious piece of meat we will ever eat. The best part is that we don't even need to cook or smother you with spices before we eat. You are both perfect just the way you are. Kaitlyn was suddenly shoved into Jack's back as a fourth monster appeared, this time behind them. You might as well just give up, little girl. We've seen you practicing with your little flashes of electricity, and they won't do you any good against us. Kaitlyn gasped as Jack lost his balance and fell to his knees. The arcs of blue-white electricity she had been gathering disappeared from her hand as she lost her concentration. Both of them were tired from training, and the process, which normally took an instant, was taking longer right now. A wet, warm nose sniffed at her neck before she felt a long, slimy tongue lick the sensitive flesh. You smell different from before. The presence that they had yet to see pulled back and yelled to the other monsters. I think she's gotten stronger. She might even be worth eating now. Jack felt the bottom of his stomach fall into oblivion as the reality of their situation became clear. With reckless abandon, he grasped for the energy inside him, feeling it twist and writhe as it flowed through him. Time seemed to stop as he focused even harder on the ocean-like well of power inside him, unaware of the blood that flowed freely from his nose and eyes. After what felt like forever but was only seconds in real time, he managed to grasp a thin tendril of power and forced it into Kaitlyn in a sudden rush of power. Do it now, he ordered her, unaware that his own eyes had begun to glow for the first time, and that a thick coating of magic covered his words, carrying them to her ears alone. Thick bright white sparks as wide and long as her legs flashed into being, each bolt of energy radiating out from her entire body. She was letting the power run rampant through her body, instead of focusing and controlling it as she would normally. Her hair floated into the air as the electricity filled the space around them. Arcs of plasma shot from her body, attacking everything indiscriminately. Only she and Jack were safe from the effects of her power. The air screamed as it ignited and burst, creating constant booms of localized thunder. Jack felt his consciousness dim as Kaitlyn's breath became labored and she pressed against his back, giving everything to the electrical storm she had created around them. The last thing he remembered feeling before passing out was her collapsing on top of him while the heat of an inferno roared somewhere behind them. Jack felt wrung out when he finally came to. It felt as though someone had reached into his body and twisted some unseen part of him that he hadn't even been aware existed. Don't move yet, his mother's voice whispered to him as he stirred with a groan. Kaitlyn? He asked through a thick dry mouth and swollen tongue. She's going to be fine. She's still unconscious though, she told him as she dribbled water into his mouth. He swallowed thirstily and let it fill the inside of his mouth, relieving the desert-like dryness. The water was pulled away from his mouth and sprinkled onto his eyes as she ran a cloth over his lids, freeing them from whatever held them shut. Jack's eyes fluttered open as she pulled away a small blood-soaked hand towel from his face. Is that blood? He asked softly, his mouth quickly drying out again. His mother's tear-swollen eyes appeared above him. What were you thinking, using that much power? It could have killed you. She shrieked, forgetting that they weren't alone. It wasn't that much, it was only a little stream. He tried to defend himself from her wrath. You just barely learned about it. Anything more than a drop at this point is a lot. I should never have let her be the one to train you. The two of you almost got yourself killed tonight because you were careless. That's not what happened. It was monsters, he muttered, trying to defend their actions weakly. There were no monsters there when we arrived. The sharp voice of Kaitlyn's mother shot across the room to them. I guess we were successful then, he muttered wryly as the last of the moisture was wicked from his mouth. It took everything he had in him to twist his head and look across the room to where Kaitlyn was laying limp and pale. There was a soft, disbelieving snort from Kaitlyn's mom before Kaitlyn herself interjected with a whisper-soft, raspy voice. He's right. There were monsters there, 4 of them. Chantel's mouth snapped closed with a click as her daughter confirmed what he had said. Her eyes shot to Eleanor's with a glare. I thought this area was supposed to be safe. She hissed angrily. Eleanor slumped down onto the bed next to her son, as she thought about what had happened. It was safe until you moved here. We hadn't had an attack in years before you arrived. Water? Jack asked hoarsely as the bed shifted beneath him. Absently, his mother held a glass of the clear, refreshing liquid to his lips. We need to do something. Either way, this marks the second attack within a week. Her eyes drifted down to her son. I have a feeling that the attacks are only going to become more frequent and intense now that the seal on him has been broken. Jack pushed the glass away from his mouth. How is Kaitlyn? His voice was a little stronger and clearer than a minute before. Chantel looked down at her daughter with warm, concerned eyes. She just barely avoided being seriously hurt. When you sent your power into her, she didn't have a chance to circulate it properly, and instead sent it out without having it touch her well. That is the only reason she isn't in worse condition. It will be a few days before she can use magic again, however. The connection to her well has weakened because of her actions, and the channels throughout her body have frayed from the pressure. She'll need to re-establish and strengthen that connection so that it doesn't happen again. I can heal the channels, make them stronger, but it will cause her a lot of pain. She sighed and looked over to Eleanor. On the other hand, the very fact that she didn't burn herself out from the sudden influx of power proves that they are suitable to be bonded. If they weren't, his power would have burned her from the inside out. I remember how it felt when I was using his power to heal his body. I don't think I would be able to withstand the pressure for very long. Above him, his mother stilled as she glared at Chantel. I'm fine with your daughter. She is not the issue. It's you and your parents and the kind of people you are that is the problem. Jack barely held back his sigh as he looked over at Kaitlyn, who rolled her eyes at the conversation going on above them. Once again, their mothers had gotten carried away with their talk of bonding without asking for their input. Eleanor sent one last glare at Chantel before focusing on the bedridden teenagers. The real issue here is how late the two of you stayed out. I know you chose that spot to stay out of your mother's sight. She couldn't resist the subtle dig implying this was all Chantel's fault. But you need to be more conscious of the world around you. Before you start training again, we need to find a better place for you to train, somewhere where you will be safe regardless of the time. Jack struggled to sit up before collapsing weakly back onto the bed. I don't suppose the two of you can do this somewhere else. Kaitlyn and I need to get our rest if we're going to go to school tomorrow. School? His mother screeched. After draining yourself like that, you are not going to school tomorrow. You are going to stay home and get your energy back. Jack struggled to keep his face straight at his mother's predictable reaction. They didn't have to worry about school now. Across from him, Kaitlyn smiled softly, feeling the same way as him about not having to attend school. Although the rumors about the two of them would be out of control when neither of them showed up to school. The mothers stood from their respective places and stomped from the room, glaring at each other. Eleanor flung open the door and impatiently tapped her foot on the carpeted floor as she waited for Chantel to walk through first. The door closed behind them with a resounding click that had both teenagers sagging back into their beds in relief. They really don't like each other, Kaitlyn muttered from across the room, looking up at the ceiling. Jack felt his stomach clench suddenly as he realized he was alone with her. Everything was different now, for him at least. He had realized it as he felt her hugging his back before they had passed out. He trusted her, he cared for her, and more than that, he was attracted to her. Okay, that last one wasn't exactly new. He had always known how attractive she was. It had simply been secondary up to this point, however, and now, with his realization, it was at the forefront of his mind. Did she like him back? If she did, was it in a boyfriend way or just as a friend? Should he ask her? Was he willing to throw away the time they had together if she said no, and what if she said no, but they still had to keep up his training? That would be so awkward. He had only known her for a few days, but so much had already happened to them both. Jack breathed in deep and slowly let out the captured air. Where are we going to train from now on? He asked her, chickening out on saying anything regarding his growing feelings. I don't know. It sounded like they were going to find a place for us anyway, Kaitlyn said while stretching her hand to the ceiling. I can barely feel the magic in my body now. Her voice was soft as her eyes filled with tears. I'm nothing without my magic. It's why we came here in the first place. I was almost nothing with it, and now I might lose it altogether if my mother can't heal the channels in my body." Jack squeezed his eyes shut, desperately wishing he knew what to say to her. "Your mom said it would be painful, but that she could fix them." He turned to face her. "Kaitlyn," he waited for her to turn and look at him, his heart clenching painfully at the sight of her tears. "We need to change up our training from here on out. I don't want you to get hurt again. We need to start working on getting your abilities and channels stronger as well. We can't focus solely on your well. You have to be strong enough to use my power without getting hurt." Kaitlyn sucked in her lips before releasing them with a sniffle. "You're right. I have to become stronger than I am. If I can't safely use your power, then there is no way we can ever be fully bonded." "Is that what you want?" Jack asked before clarifying his question. "To be fully bonded with me?" She kept her eyes on him as she swallowed thickly. "I don't know, but I don't hate the idea as much as I should." The raised voices of their mothers in the hall arguing ended their chances of saying anything more. Eleanor's face was livid, and Jack could swear he saw a portion of her power beginning to peek through her eyes. "Jack, get up, we are leaving now." She turned from him to Kaitlyn. "Kaitlyn, I'll be expecting you at dinner tomorrow night. Make sure to leave your wrinkled old hag of a mother at home." Kaitlyn's eyebrows rose as her mother screeched from the doorway. "Wrinkled old hag. We're the same age." Her shrill voice echoed through the small room painfully. Jack struggled to sit up as his body protested him moving. "I've got him, I'll carry him out to your car. Both of you shut up or go somewhere else." John's voice cut past his wife, her mouth shutting with a snap as she turned to glare at her much taller husband. "Thanks, Dad," Kaitlyn whispered weakly before either mother could start up again. "And don't worry, I'll be there, Mrs. Rage. I've been wanting to meet Penelope anyway." John gently pushed Eleanor to the side and pushed his arms under Jack, lifting the teenager without difficulty. "I'll see you tomorrow, Kaitlyn," he managed to get out before he was carried from the room. John's head swiveled to look behind them for a quick second. "I need to thank you for trying to keep my little girl safe today. That said, you almost did more harm than good to her. If the two of you are going to continue training together in the future, then you need to be more careful and more aware of the world around you. Do you understand?" Jack could only nod dumbly as he was carried from the house like a princess, once more reminded of how close he had come to screwing up. "I'll do better," he promised quietly to himself and to Kaitlyn's father.